This has been the biggest change in my practice over the last 5 years is I now have someone who can actually get the work done while I'm on the front end taking leads in real time. So At this stage, there's a standing rule in the office that if a lead calls in, that no matter what I'm doing, if I'm in the middle of working on something, the lead comes first.
Hello and welcome to the Unbundled Attorney Mastermind Podcast. My name is Dave Aarons and I'm the founder and CEO of Unbundled Attorney. In this podcast, we interview our unbundled attorneys, as well as the leading experts in the industry, to identify the best practices for converting leads into paying clients and how to ethically and profitably deliver unbundled legal services and other affordable options in your practice. To learn more about how our exclusive unbundled leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com. Welcome, everybody, to the Unbundled Attorney Mastermind Podcast. We are very, very pleased to have a long time friend and unbundled attorney joining us on the show. It's long since overdue, but happy that we're getting a chance to convene and talk about what these last 5 years have looked like in working together. So, Ms. Bridgette Friedman, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Maybe a good place to start, Bridgette, if you can give a little bit of context around how you got your start in the practice of law, what your primary area that you focus on. We'll start from there, and then we can talk about this journey we've been on for the last 5 years and how we've been able to accomplish what you have.
Sure, absolutely. So I graduated from law school back in 2005, took the bar in 2006, and first couple jobs out of law school, I was doing litigation and didn't enjoy the litigation. So I moved down to Central Florida. I started practicing medical malpractice defense and didn't like that. And so ultimately I got into real estate. So I started curing title defects from a real estate perspective. The real estate curative work turned into probate work. So I would cure title problems by doing probate. And then ultimately I decided, well, if I'm doing probate to cure problems, title problems, why am I not doing probate to actually help people handle estates after their loved ones die? And so I would say probably 7 or 8 years ago, I started doing probate, but I was kind of doing almost anything that came through the door that either covered real estate and or probate. The probate then led into estate planning. And so for the last, I would say 7 years, I've been doing mostly probate estate planning. And then in conjunction with the probate work that I do, I also handle real estate closing.
So pretty much anything involving property, assets, people passing those along or planning on how to protect them accordingly. Okay. So let's kind of wind back the clock a little bit. September 2018, I think is when we first started getting rolling. Maybe you can give just a brief context for what the last 5 years we've been able to accomplish working together from where you were at back in 18 and where we are now as we go into 2024. And then we can connect the dots, so to speak, in terms of how we were able to get here.
Sure. So back in 2018, when I first started with Unbundled, my law partner left to go with another law firm. He was really on retirement track, so he needed to go to another law firm with more people that he could pass his book of business to. So that left me by myself practicing law, and a lot of it was referral-based. I had started getting leads from another lead source before I knew about Unbundled Attorney. So I was getting leads, and then I realized once he left that if I didn't have the referral source from him, because he was much more seasoned than I was, and he had a bigger referral base, I had to do something. So it turns out I was on a podcast about technology. This was Adriana Linares. She had a podcast, and Unbundled Attorney was a sponsor of her legal technology podcast. And so after I heard her episode,
I think it was the New Solo, right? New Solo podcast or something along those lines?
Yeah, I think it may have been that. So I Googled Unbundled Attorney, and of course I got to the website and I thought, well, I'm already doing leads. They talk about being the highest lead source, so why not give them a try? So I think I called a number and I got a hold of Graham. And Graham said, he told me all about the program. I said, listen, am I going to get in trouble with my bar with taking leads? Is this, appropriate? Is this a thing? Can this be done? Because I don't want to get hurt for solicitation. And so he assured me that it was an appropriate source of getting leads from a third-party company. So I decided to sign up, and he had me go online and fill in my information through the website so that I could sign up. And from that point forward, I started getting leads. So back in 2018, I would say that I, just by myself, I was able to generate about $200,000 in collectible. So I had a paralegal at the time. So it was just me with one paralegal and a legal assistant. I did all the bookkeeping at the firm. I did all of the billing, plus practicing law. I relied heavily on my paralegal. Every year, one of the things that I think is important to note is that when COVID hit, my revenues went down substantially because of COVID. Even though people were dying and I was doing probate, my revenues took a plunge because it was just a hard time in the market. So my first year on the program, I went from $200,000 to $328,000. So I had increased my revenues over $100,000. COVID hit and it bumped down to $287,000. But then after COVID, things started going up. It was a trajectory, kind of like the stock market. It would go up and then down, but up. But I mean, each year it's gone up. So 2021, I was nearing about $400,000, and these are receipts. These aren't just gross sales. These were actually receipts. 2022, I bumped up to almost $600,000. So I increased about $200,000. Now, I did have one probate that came in from a referral that year. That was almost $100,000 fee. So I can't see. So my revenues bumped up because of one probate. It wasn't an unbundled. So I don't want to say, hey, look how great my numbers looked, because I did get lucky. But then last year in 2023, I hit $600,000 in collectibles. So each year it has steadily increased. I would say probably per month, I'm spending anywhere between $8,000 and $10,000 in leads.
Okay, great. So maybe we can just talk through some of the high level best practices or approaches to practicing that have evolved for you over the years, from maybe when we first started in 2018 to the way in which you work with your clients today. And you can kind of take that in whatever direction you feel has been the biggest impact for you in terms of how things evolved. And then we can maybe break that down into some of its component parts as we go.
Sure. So initially, the training that I got was you need to get on the phone immediately with clients, with potential leads, and you need to speak to them within 3 minutes of them calling. And
real time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this was before Direct Connect. So they would call in, we would call them as soon as we could. And like everything else, I was doing everything. So it wasn't as easy for me to get on the phone immediately and talk to people. And I still had 2 lead sources coming in. Okay. And so I ended up dropping the other source because I didn't want to not be an exclusive recipient. They were sending out leads to multiple attorneys, and the client would get 5 calls. And by the time I got to them, it was too late. So I decided that having exclusive leads was better for me. But I got so busy that I couldn't take the leads right on immediately. And I think that hurt my conversion rate. I was still making money, but I was not capitalizing on all the leads. So as I would say in the last 2 years, though, I had a little more support. I had a couple of paralegals at this point. It was still just me. From 2018 until last year, it was just me with paralegals helping me get work done. I will say that last year in 2023, at the beginning of the year, I hired an associate. So I started to try to contact people immediately. Then I sort of went by the wayside. I wasn't contacting people as fast as I should. Sometimes I'd have 4 and 5 consults a day, and I couldn't sustain it. I couldn't still do consults, but also get the work done. So now that I have an associate, this has been the biggest change in my practice over the last 5 years, is I now have someone who can actually get the work done while I'm on the front end taking leads in real time. So at this stage, there's a standing rule in the office that if a lead calls in, that no matter what I'm doing, if I'm in the middle of working on something, the lead comes first. And so I'm able to take calls. If they direct connect in, I take them as soon as I can. And if they don't direct connect, but I have my assistant reach out to them, see if they can talk immediately, and then I immediately take the call. And conversion rates have changed considerably since I've started doing that.
How much of a difference was it for you when we deployed Direct Connect? Because it took quite a good amount of time to get that developed. For those that are familiar, Direct Connect is a live transfer system that gives the client the option to be live transferred directly to the attorney's office through our system, not through a human, but through a system that calls the client, and then when they answer, then they can connect over to the attorney they've been matched up with. In this case, Bridgette, and then also gives the client the option to book an appointment directly on their calendar using an integration we have with Calendly. And so, whereas before Direct Connect, I think our connection rate where clients would call in was maybe 30%. Now it's closer to 70 to 80%, where the leads are either live transferring straight to the office or booking directly on the calendar if lawyers take advantage of the integration with Calendly. Did that make a difference for you to some degree, just in terms of being able to balance out the amount of outreach and follow up and so forth, to be able to just have more of those folks either just calling you directly or having a book on the calendar?
Absolutely. It without question. I think the client is more willing. They're like, wow, I can talk to an attorney right now. In my case, they're going through a lot of grief when they've lost a family member. Most of the time, it's shortly after someone's died that they'll call. Now, I'll get people who they've had people die a couple of years ago, and they'll call. But for the most part, someone has just died. They're making funeral arrangements, and they don't know what to do with their stuff. They don't know what they can and can't do, and they really want to talk to somebody quickly.
Okay. And so there's the associate that's been helping with keeping up with some of the legal work, but maybe before we get to just kind of the roles and responsibilities and how that's been able to help free up your time to be more responsive to some of these folks, maybe we could just unpack a little bit of the business model that you've developed over the time as well. Maybe comparing to more of a traditional way of approaching probate cases, payment arrangements, and then also perhaps how you've done the estate planning, the packaged offer versus, point by point. Maybe, I don't know if that's evolved over the years to some degree, but maybe you can speak to some of the core the primary shifts that you've implemented over the years so that you can provide services to people that may be a little bit more constrained financially.
Sure. So that's even changed even as of this year. I used to, at the very beginning, when I would take probate cases, I would take $500 up front. And I think it's important for people to know when they get a call from Unbundled that they have just come off of the Unbundled website and they're reading what is on the website. So you may want to go back and review what's there, because clients will often say, oh, I heard it was only $1,500. And that's when I have to remind them, well, no, it's starting from $500 to $1,500 to get started. And so they do see that. That's very attractive to clients when they see, wow, I can get a probate done for relatively something that's reachable for them. So initially when I started out, I would collect essentially the filing fee and the publication fee. So that is about $500 up front. And that just gets us started. Now, what I would do was I would wait to get paid for the probate, which sometimes is 6 to 9 months later. I'd wait to get paid, and that was attractive to people because they could put $500 down and then they could still get the probate that they needed. We would still be making the money that we wanted to make, which in Florida, a reasonable fee is about 3% of the value of the estate. So they didn't have to come up with upfront fees. A lot of attorneys will collect $4,500 to $5,000, and it can go up from there. But people, They don't have that kind of money. And so a lot of times when people call in, I like to have continuity. So they come off of Unbundled, they get to me, I talk to them and say, yes, I see that you've come in through Unbundled Attorney. My philosophy is aligned with their philosophy, which is I want you all to have access to legal services. I recognize that people don't have $5,000 sitting around waiting for a probate to happen. Now, that was probably 3-4 years ago that was my business model. About a year ago, I switched it up because I was always concerned that, oh, they can't pay the money. And what I realized is that people can pay the money. They just can't pay all the money.
All up front. That's right.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That key differentiator that we're talking about on the site, which is, most attorneys are saying, hey, $4,500 to $5,000 up front, right? As opposed to, hey, $500, $1,000, $1,500 to start, and then potentially payments from there, or you can describe kind of how you structure it from now.
Right. So about a year ago, I made a modification. And so now I will quote them normal fees, what you would 3% or, and I have my fee structure is there's two types of probate you can file, a summary or formal. There's certain cases that you can do a summary on and others that you really want to go formal. So on a summary administration, I quote a minimum of $4,500 or 3%, and then I put in whichever's greater. That way I have a floor of $4,500, so I know at least I'm making $4,500. But if the estate is greater than a certain amount, I'm going to make 3%.
Right.
So I'm still getting the normal and reasonable fee that our statutes tell us is presumed reasonable. On a formal administration, I'm at $6,500. And then up front now, I charge $1,500 up front. So it's a non-refundable $1,000 fee. And it's a $500 cost deposit plus publication fee. So I'm able to immediately bill out $1,000 a month, or $1,000 right away, so that I can sustain the practice and I can keep making payroll and not floating as much of the revenue, so that by the time the probate closes in 6 to 9 months, I'm able to pay everybody, I'm able to keep the business going, but then we're still getting our 3% on the back end. The other thing that
so
I'll add,
the $1,000 in that scenario is is basically the cash flow that's needed to sustain the business between the time you sign them up and then the 6 to 9 months that the probate is going to get handled.
right.
And so that way you're not, bridging that entire gap for the firm financially.
Yeah. Otherwise, you've got to front load your firm with capital so that you can sustain yourself for the year. And that can be scary. And for a long time, that's why I didn't have the capital to front load it. And I mentioned earlier, I had a real big probate. I had money. I said, okay, now's the time to hire. I sort of wanted to pay for it on the front end instead of stress out throughout the year.
Well, that's wise. I mean, one could go into debt and so forth, but to have access to the capital that's needed. But on the other hand, it's one of the things I've always appreciated, Bridget, is that you've kind of built this in a stair-step fashion. And we've talked about this before, where it's if you do it kind of one step at a time, you don't try to take on too much too fast, then you'll always have the reserves that you need. You always have a model you can rely on. You've got those kind of past cases that are coming in and maturing. That's help funding the future ones. And so there's you've kind of invested the amount of time and built the infrastructure that you need to be able to continue to grow the firm in a gradual manner.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how it's gone. I mean, I've seen other people at the mastermind and they're catapulting very quickly, and I admire them. I look at them and think, wow, how can I do that? It's just that where my comfort level is, wherever I've been, it's the stair-step approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and we've had a lot of lawyers that have had pretty amazing rocket ship stories. You're referring to the Mastermind Retreat, which is the in-person retreat that we do for unbundled attorneys every year and a half or so. But sometimes that's not as sustainable. And we had an example recently where one of the highest performing, highest grossing attorneys that were doing $500,000 to $1 million a month had opened up a third office that was about 3 hours away, and had a partner that was going to be running that office, but then that didn't end up working out. And they were trying to manage 3 different offices from different places, and ultimately are having to kind of take a step back to really shore up to that region in order to kind of build the right infrastructure, get the right people in place, because it became too much too fast, right? They didn't have the right people in place. So being able to do this in kind of a stair-step gradual manner is usually going to be the most prudent approach, even though there's a lot of shiny object syndrome. It's hey, wow, those guys have gone this to here this fast. And you can absolutely do it, but you have to have the right team in place. But it's not something that people are going to do it alone. You need to build assemble the right team, get partners in place to achieve that level, that pace of scale. Okay.
Right.
And that may or may not be in the cards for depending on how you want to build the firm. Okay,
Yep,
cool. So that was probate. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to segue right into estate planning. So on the estate planning side, we sell packages of a will, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, and living will. And so we'll charge, and I know that my fees are low, but I'm okay with it. I tend to get paid faster on an estate planning case than I do a probate.
Mhm.
So I charge $1,200 for a package, a basic package of those 4 documents. Sometimes we will also need to include a certain type of deed so that they can pass their real estate to their children without having to go through the probate process. Sometimes I'll get people that call and I'm right in there with a starting from $500 to $1,500. So I'm within that band. And sometimes they'll say, well, I don't have the $1,200 to pay. And so I will break down each document into a fee. And I'll say, look, I understand you came in through Unbundled. You want to get this done, but yet you just don't have all of the money up front. So here's what we're going to do. Why don't you just pay as you go? So we'll send you a trust request and we'll say, here's the trust request for $1,200. I will put the due date out 3 to 6 months or something in the future, depending on what they tell me. And so I say, start making payments. And once you get to a certain level, we'll go ahead and we'll send you your healthcare surrogate. That's depending on what their needs are. Sometimes they'll say, oh, I need the power of attorney right away. So I charge $350 for one of those. Once the $350 come in, I'll have notes that they're on a payment plan. And I will then send them the power of attorney, have them come into my office and sign to have it executed. And so that's the way that we've incorporated the unbundled payment plan, so to speak, with our estate planning client.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it's like a pay as you go. So if they can't do the $1,200 up front, you kind of find out what it is that they can put down to get started. And then you set them up on a payment plan from there. How do you typically structure the deposit? What's the payment plan? And then do you have kind of like benchmarks or checkpoints, so to speak, where once they reach this amount, then you can do this. And once you reach this amount, you can do this. There's like thresholds that they reach to get each document done as they go.
Yep, there's exactly. And so I'll usually let them decide. I'll say, what do you think is most important? And with estate planning, it's, do you think you're going to die first? Do you think you're going to need somebody to make financial decisions for you before you die? Do you think you're going to need medical decisions made for you? And sometimes I say it's more likely that you're going to become disabled or incapacitated than you are to die. And so maybe we should work on the healthcare surrogate or the power of attorney first, and then move on to doing your will. And it's really client specific, because if a client tells me I only have a house and that's the only thing I have, and I've put a beneficiary on my bank account, sometimes I'll say, look, let's just go straight to this deed that you need. And that way you'll leave your house to whoever. And so we've got that. We've done some estate planning, almost spot by spot, asset by asset estate planning.
Okay. Is there a delineation between wills, trusts? Are there more complicated trusts that are drafted in Florida, other than or is pretty much any kind of estate plan that you're going to be doing going to be fall within that package, more or less?
So trusts are extra. Not everybody, I can't tell you how many people call me or come in through Unbundled and say, I need a trust drawn up. Okay. Because I'm straightforward and ethical and I do right by clients, because I want them to come back to me when they need other things and I want to be a referral source for them. We have those conversations about whether or not they actually need a trust. They've gone out on the internet, they've researched, they think that they've got it all figured out, and then they get on the phone, and that's when the education starts. And so I will do 15-minute consultations, by the way, at no charge. And I will let the client know up front, look, I've got 15 minutes so I can even figure out if I can help you. A lot of times I can figure out very quickly, can I help or not? And if I can't, I can refer them on to somebody who can help them. If I am able to help them, I say, listen, this is going a little more beyond the initial consultation. If you'd like to retain me, I can give you, advice, and we can go on an hourly basis. And then we'll sign an engagement letter to keep going on our hourly schedule.
I find that happens sometimes where you're kind of like, there's a lot to talk about. So then you'll kind of transition into like a coaching hour by hour, so to speak, or like legal advice package for another hour or a couple hours. And then they kind of make a decision from there if they want to make the investment for whatever structure that they want to put into place.
Right. The correct answer would be yes, that's how we should do it. In reality, though, once I get to talking to a client, you try to feel them out and you try to figure out, is this going to be a client that's going to hire us? And sometimes it's a loss leader that you give them a lot of advice. You go over your 15 minutes and then they end up saying, okay, great, I'm going to call so-and-so and talk about it. And then you never hear from them again. But other times in 15 minutes, I'll say, okay, what do I do? How do I move? I will tell you probably one of the best things I started doing since probably in the last 3 months is when I get on the phone with an unbundled lead and it turns out that I can't help them or that they don't need an attorney, I will immediately after the consult send them an email and ask them to send me a Google review, because I've just spent the money on the lead. I've just spent 15 minutes talking to them and I couldn't help them, but that Google review is invaluable. So it's not always a loss when you do spend more time talking to somebody, because you still may get something, a review like that out of it, which, like I said, consumers are very savvy these days. They're looking online, they're looking at your reviews, they're looking to see what other people say about you. I mean, I had somebody go back to the 4 years ago on a review, and it was not a pleasant review. And they, brought it up, and I said, "Yeah, well, I'm glad that you asked, because now I can address it."
Yeah. In a straightforward fashion.
Yes, exactly.
Tell you the full story. That's really great, because obviously if you've taken the time with someone and maybe they're not in a position to move forward, or perhaps the case factors might preclude that it doesn't make sense to move forward, or whatever it might be, you've taken the time, you've been honest and straightforward with them, and people are going to appreciate that. And certainly in that moment when it's fresh, they're going to go, "Oh, wow, she did take the time. She helped me out." And I would imagine a number of your reviews are about how the fact that you really listened and took the time to guide them. And if they need your service in the future, they'll definitely reach out, that kind of thing. I would imagine that's nested in the review.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then if they don't hire us, so I know I figure at some point you may ask what software I'm using. So I'm on the Clio platform. I have both Clio Grow and Clio
How did you
Manage.
know, Bridgette?
Well, I've heard a couple of your podcasts.
Have you been listening to the podcast? Oh my gosh. Podcast listener.
Yes. Initially, whenever I first got onto the system, I listened to even podcasts that were not my practice area, because there was always some nugget in the podcast that was relevant and that was helpful.
Yes. Sage advice. The podcast is interviewing, other unbundled attorneys that are building leads and trying to come up with affordable ways to package their services to bridge that gap for people financially, and do it in ways that are going to be, beneficial financially for their practice. And there's a lot of ways to explain what it is we do and how we contrast from other lawyers and how we build those relationships. So absolutely, just because the nature of the case might be about family law or immigration, the ways in which the services can be offered and the ways in which you can relate to clients is certainly going to be applicable across all practice areas, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you've got Clio, you got Clio Grow. Did you build the document automation into Clio Grow, or do you have a separate tool for the drafting side of the estate planning?
So right now I am in transition I use a platform called Form Builder to draft all of my probate documents and all of my estate planning documents. And I think I pay $150 a month or so for Form Builder. But I am shifting over to Loyal so that I can, and admittedly, I'm very techie. I'm not afraid of technology. In fact, I embrace it. Sometimes I'll shop on the Clio's app store just to look and see what they're integrating with, to see if it's something that I might be able to use for integration purposes. So that's how I got onto Loyal. Or actually, I think Clio sent us a pop-up and said, "Hey, we bought Loyal."
Yeah.
So what I would like to do, and if you're not on any of the platforms, but especially if you're on Clio, Grow merges data into Manage, and Loyal integrates with Manage. So the idea here is that my clients initially are going to come in through Grow. We're going to have a questionnaire and an intake that says, what's the name of the deceased? What's the date of death? Where did they die? What was their address? And all of the information that our petitions require. So those data points will be on the intake. We're then just going to merge it over to Manage, because that's where the data ultimately, there's no going from Manage to Grow. You can only go from Grow to Manage. So we're integrating the data over into Manage, and then Loyal picks up the custom fields from Manage to then generate documents. So the document automation is seamless. Whereas right now, what's happening is my intakes are coming in through Grow. We can we can merge into Manage, but the problem is Manage is not as friendly as Loyal to create documents. And so we're having to do a lot of manual data input. So the intakes come in to Grow, we're manually inputting into Form Builder, and that's costing me labor, that's costing time. And so right now I would say I'm in a transition period where I'm trying to
just streamline the data entry, the document, like client information into forms, into the documents that are needed. I think a lot of lawyers are scared of AI or some of these automation systems that they're going to replace their position. Well, most of what they're going to be doing is the administrative things that just kind of like bog down the time of the attorney, right? It's this gathering of client information, which can be handled by an intake form online, and then inputting into the forms and form completing, legal research, figuring out the case law. I mean, a lot of the just like the kind of heavy lifting of like forms, data, case law, and so forth, that just takes you away from the substantive aspects of counseling your clients, being the attorney and counselor of law, guiding them in terms of the appropriate direction that they need to take in their matter, and then the right structure in the case of estate planning, and just being there to support and advise your client, right, and represent them in court, so forth. So, in essence, it's really helping lawyers like yourself more focus on the things that are your strongest suits and that the clients can manage most, which means if you're having to spend a lot less time with the administrative aspects of it, then you can serve more clients, you can be more attentive, you can expand and grow your firm, you can it can affect your costs, you can have a greater margin because things are more efficient and take you less time. You can extend additional offerings for people that might be even more constrained financially. So this opens up more and more options for the attorneys to do so. So it's really great that you're taking the time, because it does take time, right?
It does.
To do the custom fields and so forth,
Yeah.
to build out these systems. It takes some time to like build the systems and the streamline, right? From Clio Grow intake into Clio Manage down to Law Yaw, and you have to have all the custom fields merged and so forth. But when you have the product done, it's like client fills out that intake form, then the estate plan is probably what some percentage complete at that point. Okay.
Yes.
Some
It is.
high percentage.
Very much so. The healthcare surrogate, the power of attorney, and the living will, all those can be very automated. It's once I get to the will, that's where the customizations can really get. It's not going to be as easy to make it turnkey. So I probably will never be able to get rid of Form Builder, but I will be able to create the other documents in a lot faster time.
It's essential, especially with a document practice like estate planning. Nowadays I can't. We don't work for Law Yaw, but I can't imagine an estate planning attorney not taking advantage of these tools, because the efficiencies and the time savings that are involved with taking the time to implement them can really transform a practice in terms of the amount of time it takes to get these services out the door. All right, cool. So let's switch gears. We talked about probate and kind of the business model and how that's evolved. We talked about estate planning and the pay-as-you-go estate planning services. And we might just give like an example of like, okay, if you've got a $1,200 package, or maybe an example of a trust of like what you might accept as like initial deposit, how you would structure a payment plan for somebody that might be going down the pay-as-you-go package, so that attorneys can better understand how that's actually set up and how that billing takes place if you're using a recurring billing tool, or how that's structured.
Yeah. So initially, I will ask them what package are they looking for. Are they just going a la carte? We actually have a price list, and it shows them a la carte. And that's why I tell them, look, I don't base my pricing on what you told me your net worth was. I base my pricing based on what you need. And so they know what each document would cost them. So if they tell me, look, I can pay you $500 up front, and then I can pay you $200 a week for the next 4 weeks, or I have to do the math on that. But we start out with an initial trust request, and we just make the due date so far in advance, like so far out, that they can still go back and click the link to make payments.
Okay. Or in certain cases, do you have them do like a recurring billing, like $100 a week or a couple $100 every other week? Have you played around with the scheduled payments tool?
No. I know it can be done. Part of it is there's not a way. What I would like to see with the software is that you send out a request and have them go in and say, I will pay this much every so often. Right now, you have to manually go in and you have to set up payment plan, and then have their credit card there so that you can plug in their credit card number. Unless they've changed it, I haven't looked at it in a while, but that's how it was at one point. So if they were in your office, you could set it up and you can start the payment plan. So there was no way for me to send out, here's the plan, put your credit card number in, and it's going to bill you every so often going forward. I haven't seen that functionality.
I think I may be mistaken about this. Law Yaw or Law Pay, if you're listening, or Clio Payments, reach out to Ms. Friedman. They are listening. They're always listening. But I believe if you send out a payment link and they do a charge for the initial deposit, then that card is on file. Now you don't actually have all the card information, but you just have like XXX and then the last 4 digits and so forth. And then I believe at that point you can set up a scheduled payment from there once they've paid their initial deposit. So you can have that conversation with them, process the initial deposit through the link, and then you can go in yourself and set up a scheduled payment using the card that's now on file.
Yeah, I'm on LawPay, so that's something I'll have to revisit that.
Yeah. Otherwise, you would have to take the card information over the phone and then like do it all yourself. I don't think that's necessary. I think there is a way to do it where you can have them charge and then just set up the scheduled payment based on that card being on file. But we'll follow up on this.
Yeah,
and make sure. Okay, but it's great. I mean, it's like not only is it within that $500 to $1,500 to get started, and then payment plans from there, which is the core business model, but also like even if they can't do that amount right away, or they need to kind of pay it out over time, you have a structure, I think in the diamond industry, they call this layaway, right? Where it's like, hey, you pay $200 now and $100 a week or $200 every couple of weeks or so and just make payments. And then like as you reach, and then once you have it paid off, then we can, deliver it or it's paid off over time. And it just, in essence, lowers the barrier to entry to legal services. But has there been any issue for you? Like when you really run the numbers or look at it objectively in terms of like clients starting making payments and then they disappear? I mean, when we think about why would attorneys not do that, I would imagine that would be one of their primary considerations as well. If I let them pay less amount up front, then I'm going to do a bunch of work and not get paid for it. How have you created boundaries or constraints, or what's been your experience on that front?
So interestingly enough, that's a great question. And this is the way I explain it to my clients, because they say, when do I pay you? When do I pay you? So the way that we do it is I send them the engagement letter through Clio. They sign the engagement letter. I also send them the intake form through Grow. They complete the intake form. It comes back to us. We know that it's go time. We get going. We prepare the full estate plan without having any money down. Now, keep in mind, I'm preparing 4 documents at $1,200. I've got no money in the bank yet, but they don't have documents yet. Okay. So once we prepare the estate plan, at that point, I send them the trust request. And I let them know, I say, listen, I like to put the carrot in front of the horse. I like to have something that I'm working towards. I like to have the thought of getting paid after I get your documents done. That's what's going to motivate me to get your documents done. Once they're done, I can then send you their trust request. And as soon as we get notification from LawPay that the trust request has been paid, I'm able to turn around and email you your drafts. So it's worked beautifully because they feel like no one wants to pay a whole bunch of money and then wait 6 months to get something back.
Right.
Or even a week or 2 or a month. But I'm able to, because I make sure that I'm not sending out a trust request until I have the documents prepared. It enables me to turn right around and email drafts out, and they realize, wow, we've got the drafts. Once they look at their drafts, if they have changes to make, they come back to us, we make the changes. Sometimes when they see it in final form, they realize, oh, now I see how this is going. No, I'd rather switch these 2 people and I'd rather have somebody else be my healthcare surrogate first and then someone else. So we'll make those changes and then schedule them to come in to execute their documents. It's worked out.
So there isn't necessarily a monetary exchange right then and there necessarily. You're getting them, okay, cool, that makes sense. That sounds good. Cool, let's get your intake going. And then they complete the fee agreement. They start doing intake. And like every step that the client takes and every piece of information they give you from that point forward, further committing them to continuing to move forward, even if they haven't made the payment at that point, right? It's like, they have momentum. They've completed the whole intake process at that point. The documents are being in order. And obviously, because of the fact that you've built out some document automation in the back end, those drafts are almost already ready once they've completed their intake form. And there's really not a whole lot of time on your guys' side, with the exception, of course, the trust. But that trust request goes out, you start getting payments, and maybe you don't start working on the will or the trust part of it until that part is done. You basically rely on the document automation to get most of it done. And then once you start to see some money, some payments being made, then you start to work on that side of it.
Typically, it's easier for us because once we're in the software, we may as well just draft everything. So what I'll do is I'll just hold those documents in escrow, essentially. So I just hold them in my file. And if they pay for one document, we'll go ahead and we'll email the one document out. And they'll sign that one and come in. And then usually they will try to make their full payment so that they're not coming back in multiple times to sign documents. I had a guy the other day that came in. He was a veteran and he had paid most of his fee. And I made a business decision that I was going to go ahead and have him come in and sign all of his documents. And I said, if he ends up not paying us, and so I'm willing to take that risk, but he really needed to get his documents executed. So, I mean, there are business decisions that you have to make along the way. So I don't just hard and fast put my feet in the sand and say, no, this is the policy and this is all we're going to do.
We have a similar core value. It's humans before policies, which is, always before you decide about whether to enforce a policy or follow the way something is structured, you must first consider the human involved and the uniqueness of the situation, and then make a decision on what the right way to approach it is, whether to enforce that policy or not. Right. So you keep that kind of fluidity available to you so you can do the right thing or take the risk if you want to take it based on the circumstance and your evaluation of the person that you're working with.
Yeah. And I've empowered my associate to do that, to make those split decisions. And if she's on the phone with somebody, if I can't do a consult, like right now, she's doing a couple consults for me while I'm talking to you. But she knows that she's empowered, that if she sees that, oh, you know what, I think we're going to cut a break to this client. And here's why. The person's been dead for 2 years. There's a will. It's not going to be contested. We're going to still make money that we're going to charge, and they need the assistance. And that's what I've instilled in the people around me, so that they don't have to come to me every time and say, hey, Bridgette, can we cut a deal? Hey, Bridgette, can we cut the fee? Or can we restructure it? It's like I give her latitude to do that. Even though we're on the Unbundled network, it doesn't always mean that the people that are calling us are not able to pay. A lot of people, yes, they're out there and they're seeing what you all are doing digitally on getting people routed to us. But I had a guy that called me, and he didn't have anybody that he knew that was an estate planner, and the estate planner that he had called wouldn't call him back. So somehow he came onto the Unbundled website, and he plugged in his information. He got to me. I immediately took his call. And the man says, look, I'm going through a divorce and I need to do some estate planning. And my other attorney that I was calling and working with won't call me back. So I'm calling you now. And he says, I have a fairly sizable estate. And I like to say that I'm the people's attorney. Okay. we're not a big PI firm where we're making millions of dollars. I like to service the little people. I grew up, I was a little person. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money when I grew up, and I identify very closely with people who don't have as much. And so I asked the guy, I said, well, sir, what does sizable mean? And he said, 30 million. And I said, sir, you're in the wrong office. Because my malpractice doesn't even cover a claim like that if I made a misstep with trying to estate plan for somebody with that kind of money. But it was an opportunity for me to refer a case out to somebody that I know that actually does $30 million estates that might have the expertise, because you really do have to have expertise in tax. So, it really shocked me though, because I thought, wow, here's this man that is worth a substantial amount of money, and he's still coming in through Unbundled looking for legal services.
Yeah, I mean, all the time we hear about cases come through that, I guess I could mention this. One of them was an insurance case, criminal charge with the NBA in the NBA draft. On the NBA, some of the players were defrauding their insurance coverage and using additional services and stuff. Ended up being like a multi-six-figure case. It's just kind of part and parcel to having the name out there, to be doing the marketing consistently. There's a business, there's a service model that we're all employing as a platform and as a network and as a community of attorneys that makes it available for anybody to be able to access legal services that can put a few $100s down and make some payments weekly, bi-weekly. But that doesn't mean that people aren't going to be in a position to go ahead and pay the full amount. And that happens every single day, all across the network, all the time. And so just the fact that that option is available, a lot of our lawyers, for example, in family law, do unbundled limited scope services. And the majority of clients still hire them for full representation. But just knowing the fact that the clients could, if they wanted to, just have a lawyer draft paperwork for them, give them advice, do an appearance if they want, without having to do the full scope of representation, is comforting in knowing that they have that as an option. And if they were more limited on funds, they'd have that there. But most people do want to have a lawyer handling their entire case, and a lot of them still have the ability to pay a good portion of the full amount, if not the full amount right up front too. So one of the other things that I would be remiss if we didn't talk about a little bit as well too, Bridgette, is for a long time working with you, it took a little while for you to get to the point where you were like, you know what, I'm going to hire this associate. And to whatever degree you'd be open to sharing, what was it? I mean, obviously there was that big case that came in that kind of like created a financial windfall. So that certainly helped. But I would,
Yeah.
and so I'm that so you're like, all right, I'm reinvesting this. Okay. That's the
Yes.
salary for this person. I'm doing it. But maybe just talk about some of the fears or concerns that you had. And then maybe now looking back, because I think I've heard you say like, gosh, I wish I'd done this so much sooner or gotten
Mhm.
this associate because you've been able to so much more has been able to accomplish now that you have the backup. Hey, so can maybe I'm wondering if you could self-reflect on how long it took you to make that choice, what was in the way, and looking back, how you might, knowing what you know now, what might have been different for you or how you might have grown the firm a little bit differently.
If I could talk to my younger self and go back and say, here's what you should do, I would have implemented a little bit more money up front as opposed to the $500 so that I would have working capital to sustain the practice while I was bringing in cases and not having to wait the full 9 months or 6 months. And every case is different. So it could be 2 months. It just depends on the actual case. Usually if they're calling us within 2 years of someone dying, I know automatically it's 90 days because we have to publish in the newspaper. And so we have to wait the 90-day period before we can close. I would tell myself, get a little bit more money up front so that you can have somebody there to pay so that you're not stressed out. I mean, I don't want to be stressed wondering where's the next client gonna, not so much client, when's the next payday gonna come from a probate case that we close. And so I think that is the one change that I should have made earlier so that I could have hired somebody else that could have helped me get the cases out the door faster. Because what's happening now is, even though we're still only two, well, I will say I have a third attorney, but the third attorney is about 20 hours a week. And he probably is handling 15, 20 cases. So we're up to I would say 1 3/4 because my associate, she's 30 hours a week, but she works like a horse. And so she's really like 40 hours a week. So 2.5 attorneys. But I just wish that I would have been either made that change earlier or two.
The difference is $1,000, right? It was 500 instead of 1,500. Now it's 1,500. So like, we're not talking
Right.
about, well, take more money up front. Now I'm going to start asking for $5,000. Well, no, right? It's like, it's just a little bit more like on the higher end of what we tell on the website. You can get started for $500. Okay, we're going to be on a little bit on the higher side there. And that extra $1,000, if you're onboarding, let's say 20, 30 clients a month, at least, then that's $20,000, $30,000 a month in cash flow right there. That can like
Yes.
cover salaries and expenses, right? I would imagine those numbers are not far off, eh?
Yeah. No, I mean, just yesterday we brought on 3 different clients from Unbundled.
Mhm.
So it's working, but that's the one change that I think I was missing. And at this point, what I was mentioned about the other 2 attorneys, at this point, I'm trying not to carry files. I'm not trying to draft petitions. I'm not reviewing petitions. I'm not touching a file after I talk initially to the client. There is a transition email that we send over to the client to say, hey, thank you. You signed your engagement letter. Sophia is going to now be taking over and she's going to be handling your probate case, but I'm always here if you need me. Because now I can focus on the next client. If somebody were to call as soon as I get off the phone, hey, there's a lead on the phone, I'm going to take that lead. I'm not going to wait till next week. I'm not going to wait till this afternoon. And my staff up front, they're trained now. What's really important is sometimes they know right from the submission that you can't take the case. And so they're like, yeah, this is outside of the practice area. This is a real estate case. This is not what we do. It's not landlord tenant. So it's important to also train your people up front so that they know how to go in. If it's a credit request, go submit that. But at least talk to the client, and they have a list of people that, if it's not unbundled, they can refer people out. Otherwise, I do, by the way, if it comes in through Unbundled and they tell me, oh, it's a family law case, I will typically, and I hope I'm telling them the right thing, I will tell them that we're going to submit and let them know it's outside the practice area for our firm and that you all are going to reroute them to a new attorney.
Yeah, so I'm going to submit a request for your case to be reassigned to an attorney that practices in family law. And that's
Right.
absolutely what happens. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
When we
So
have
at
attorneys
least-
available, of course.
Yeah, we're sending them back over to you all
Yeah.
so that you all can route them to somebody because obviously they've come to us because they're on the platform. They like what they see. They like the idea of low upfront fees. And so I can't just refer them to somebody I know locally because they may not have the same philosophy.
Yeah, they probably don't. I mean, if it was just kind of like the legal market at large. And so how much for you? So there was, you mentioned that it's like, okay, I really wish I'd taken a little bit more money up front so that you would have had extra cash flow. that you could have utilized to hire more attorneys, right? Sooner, basically.
Yeah.
We worked together for 5 years or so, and you started hiring your associate, I think, last year, right? Was it not? No, it was
Yep, a year ago.
2022, right? About a
Yep,
year
a
ago.
year ago this month.
How much of that time period between then and there was because of cash flow, and how much of it was like just like personal concern about how, bringing on another attorney and what that would look like, and some of the challenges with that? I think it's one of the things that we really have a lot of conversations with unbundled attorneys, and we were just at that mastermind retreat. You were there, and we had guys like Karim and some of these guys that'll have like 7, 8 lawyers now, and like full in-house staff. And Karim's just like, hire the people. Like, and he was kind of like being very direct with the attorneys there. Like, it's just fear, right? A lot of them were just like afraid to grow, afraid to hire, afraid to make the investments and so forth, right? And he like broke down the numbers for everybody and so forth. So I'd just be curious to hear like how much, when you look back, that there was definitely a cash flow challenge for sure. And maybe that's just it. You didn't have the resources to do so, and how much it was more personal for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I typically have a pretty high risk tolerance. So I'm okay to take risks. When it comes to cash flow, though, I tend to be on the conservative side, because I would hate to have to tell somebody, hey, I've just hired you from this other firm. Now you're with me, and now we're short on payroll, and I can't pay you. Because, I mean, I'll tell you, there were a couple times, I mean, last year, I was down to $4,000 in the operating account. And I thought, wow, am I going to mortgage my house? Am I going to go dip into my 401k and things like that to make payroll, get a business
because of the
loan?
gaps between the probate settlements.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yep. And then miraculously, the money started coming in because she started in January. And so our cases started paying out about 6 months later. So in like August, we started getting case after case after case after case paying. And so towards the end of the year, of course, we're still on. We're bringing in cases. And so those cases will end up paying in the first quarter of this year. So I don't think that I'm going to have that same, shortage, because it wasn't a shortage, but, I'm not going to have that same dilemma.
It's a waterfall, because you've got kind of like a leading edge of 6 to 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, whatever it might be. So once you've kind of like covered that initial 6 to 9 month period, then you've got cases from 6 months ago, cases from 7 months ago, cases. And the next month it's from 6 months before that, or 7 months before that, and 8 months before that. So like, it's kind of a leading edge that you're now like just kind of riding with, because you've already passed that initial gap. That makes sense.
I think that hiring, and at least talking to some people at the mastermind, is like the first one's always the hardest. Once you hire your first person, now you kind of get some comfort with how that looks. And then now it's going to be easier to hire the next.
Yes. Yeah. When you also develop the process, you kind of identify who it is that you're looking for and work well with. But sometimes you got to hire people and go, oh, this isn't the right fit. And you're going to learn from that. Or sometimes you hire someone that's a winner right out of the gate, which is, I think, more or less been your case. I mean, I think the first associate you hired has been awesome, right?
Yeah.
You guys just kind of a natural fit.
I think too, Dave, it's the culture here as well. I am not I'm numbers driven, but I am also very people driven, and I'm here to help clients. And the culture here is such that that's what I want them to do. That's why I like working with Unbundled. I adhere to the philosophy, that you all's mission to help people. But at the same time, I want to make money. I became an attorney because I wanted to do better than I did and my mom did, and so the goal is to make money. It's just how I make the money is what's different than most attorneys. And the culture of the people that work here as well. For example, she's a mom. She's got 2 small kids. She wants to work remotely most of the time. She comes in, she's here today, but she wants to work twice a week here in the office. The very first 6 weeks or 2 months, she was here every day so that she could learn the subject matter. But now she's only in twice a week. Sometimes she comes in once a week, but she's very happy. She's happier than she's ever been in the practice of law, because she's able to be flexible, and I'm able to work with her, and she gives it right back to the firm.
Yeah, it's one of the truisms we've discovered as well, as being a location independent company. Like we have an office, but nobody's ever there. I don't know when the last time we went to that office is. And so we've all worked remotely ever since day one. And I mean, I don't know what the numbers are exactly in terms of retention of team, but mostly the original team, from the early days, because people are able to build their lifestyle around build their business around their lifestyle, not their lifestyle around their business and their work. Right. So they can kind of put their family first, make sure that they can show up in a personal way, enjoy their lives, but also, because they're so happy and enjoying the things that they're doing in their life and where they're working from and the time they're able to take with their family, then they're kind of filling their cup, right? They're feeling like solid on those fronts. And then when they come to work, they're feeling full and they're able to invest themselves fully to engage with their work from a standpoint of already being fulfilled on a personal standpoint. And it doesn't makes it feel less like work. It feels less like we're grinding or something like that. Though there's always opportunities to engage fully. But yeah, when you feel like you're really enjoying your life and living it on your own terms, and no one's kind of dictating that, like trying to manage every hour of your day, it's surprising how much people will kind of arise to that possibility and really show up because they appreciate the freedom and opportunity you've given them.
Certainly so. I mean, I'm always on the lookout for talent. I don't have kids myself, but I know a lot of women who do. And they still want to practice they still want to practice law, but they want to raise a family. And more, and I'm not a women's rights by any stretch, but more and more women are coming out of the workplace. They're staying home with their kids. They're getting pulled out of the active practice because of wanting to raise a family. And then when they do finally jump back in 5-10 years later, they're way behind. And so to that extent, if there was a way for me to help keep women involved, even stay-at-home dads, I mean, if keep people involved in the practice of law, you're not worried about finding clients. We're finding them. We just need to get the work done. And so it's been very synergistic with what we started out with. My other attorney, by the way, lives in Indianapolis. So he's not even in the state of Florida and he just works remotely. We have Slack. One of the first things I learned about at the first mastermind was everybody was talking about this Slack. So now we're on Slack and that's how we communicate to each other. My bookkeeper is up in my hometown of Chiefland up in North Florida. And so even my bookkeeper's not local. There's literally 3 people that show up here in the office.
By design.
But yeah. Oh, and my paralegal, I got one paralegal in the Philippines. So I've got, it's funny, you walk in the office and you don't think that we're all that big, but then once I start counting, well, where are all the people? And they're just not here. So
wow, 8 people on the firm now. What the heck?
Yeah, exactly. So
just when you have your team meetings, it's like, oh my gosh, there's 9, there's 10. Looking at the team, there's 30 something, almost 40 now. It's like, okay, no idea. Yeah. I didn't even know. We didn't realize, but yeah. Yeah. Next levels. Bridgette, we couldn't be happier for the success that you're having in this gradual growth that continues to occur in the positive direction, which is anytime you're building a business and growing things, that's what you want to see happening, especially amidst all the other challenges that are happening in our world. To have that be the outcomes that you've been experiencing is fantastic. And of course, more than anything else as well. I mean, that's great, but also that you've been opening the doors to literally hundreds and hundreds of clients in the 5+ years we've been working together to legal services that many of them may not have been able to position to actually afford it otherwise, including members of our team and others that have had the opportunity to work with you. So just really grateful for the work that you've done and that you're part of this community and really appreciate you coming on to share what's worked well for you and to be a part of what we're doing here.
Well, thank you for all that you do. I appreciate the masterminds. You all are not just a company that's about selling leads. You do bring more than just that to us with the other practitioners. You're kind of looking to see what other people are doing and seeing what you can adopt from other people. I think it's a great venue or a great format to learn from other people through the mastermind.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. Get an opportunity to connect in person. I mean, we meet some of the lawyers through Zoom and through the calls, but we all get in that room and we all have kind of shared aims and shared goals and similar ways of practicing and similar culture and core values. It's amazing what comes from those events. And you've been
Well, it's been a pleasure, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on the show. And for those that have been listening, thanks for taking some good notes. And I hope there's been some learning opportunities in terms of how you can structure your service offerings for estate and probate. And if you've been thinking of hiring an associate, hopefully you've got the cash flow to do so. It certainly helped Bridgette take things to the next level. So thank you for engaging with the podcast and applying these principles so that hopefully we can open the doors to more and more folks to legal services, and you can do so in a way that's going to be very profitable for your practice as well. So thanks so much and look forward to seeing you on the next episode. For more information about how our exclusive Unbundled leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com. You can watch each new episode of the podcast on the Unbundled Attorney YouTube channel, or if you prefer to listen, you can find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And be sure to subscribe so you get each new episode as soon as it's available.
And remember to leave us your review on iTunes. We read each and every one of them and really appreciate your support of the show. Once again, thanks for listening.